As I mentioned last week, I will jump the gun a little bit and begin my Advent homily series, even though Advent is not until next weekend. I let the people know, too, that the theme of the Advent homily series, we take it after the name that the Lord was given through Isaiah the prophet, that name, Emmanuel, meaning God with us. When we celebrated Thanksgiving last year, who could have ever imagined how the celebration of Thanksgiving is turning out this year? Who could have ever imagined that the celebration this year of Holy Week and Easter with public Mass not permitted? Who would have ever imagined? Or this time last year, who would have ever imagined that the attending of all school classes would take place without ever walking out the front door of the home? Or who would have ever imagined that we would actually have to be aware and catch ourselves and to be hesitant of reaching out and touching someone else? Or who would have ever imagined that toilet paper would be the most important household item? None of us this time last year could have ever imagined that we would be here this time with all that is happening. And the list can go on. And yet, for all the uncertainties of this life, there is one thing that will always be certain. The one thing that will always be sure that it cannot happen. And that is, God is with us. That's something we can't imagine. That God would not be with us. We can't imagine. God is with us. A few years ago, I had the opportunity of reading a book, an excellent book for me, the author being a Dr. Gary Chapman. And he wrote a book entitled The 5 Languages of Love. I don't know if anyone has ever had the opportunity to read that book. Again, it is a great book. Again, the title, The 5 Languages of Love. And it's those 5 languages over the next 5 weeks that I want to share with you, and that through these languages of love, how God, who is love, manifests himself in these 5 distinct ways. And so to begin, we go to the first language of love that I wish to talk about, and it is this: acts of service. Acts of service. Has this ever happened to you? Probably has. But you are having the worst day of your life. How many of us have experienced those? Yeah. You are having the worst day of your life. And all you want to do is you want to get home, you want to climb into bed, you want to cover yourself with the covers, and you just want to be forgotten by the world. It's that bad. And yet, you experience a very simple and a very singular act of service, a singular act of kindness. You come home, here we are, we're still in the fall. You're coming home thinking, but geez, today was the worst day of my life, and I still got to rake up the leaves in my yard. But you come home and you find that either your spouse or your children or your neighbor has already done that for you. Or, in the morning, you are sick. You are down for the count for the day. You know you're not moving. You're that sick. And yet later in the day, without saying anything to anybody, without anybody asking you, your neighbor comes through your front door without even bothering ringing the doorbell, and there they have an already cooked dinner for you and the family. And even though you're having the worst day of your life, that simple act of service has us exclaim, "You just made my day." And the attitude of that day completely changes, to which we then may cry out, "There is a God, and He is good." Acts of service. It's a language of love. It's proof that God is with us. God manifests Himself, manifests His love, and He manifests His own presence through our good deeds done for each other. Christ is alive. Let's take a look at our readings. The first one from Ezekiel. The Lord pictures Himself as the Good Shepherd. Listen to the acts of service. "I myself will look after my sheep. I will tend my sheep. I will rescue them from every place they were scattered. I will pasture my sheep. I will give them rest. I will seek out the lost. I will bring back the stray. I will bind up the injured. I will heal the sick. I will shepherd them rightly." All of these acts of service is God's proof of His love for us. We have Psalm 23. This is one psalm that everyone knows. "The Lord is my shepherd. There is nothing I shall want." And then we look to the gospel. Here, Matthew. This part of Matthew's gospel, chapter 5, this is the end of that chapter. And so this is the very last teaching of the Lord before He enters into His passion. This is the last. And He saves the best for last. A life of service. We have the works of mercy. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, shelter the homeless, clothe the naked, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned. These works, these acts of service, these manifestations of God's love can literally bring life to others. Someone is starving, food, their life is saved. Someone's dying of thirst, literally dying of thirst. You give them drink, their life is saved. A person is naked, out in freezing weather. Giving them clothing saves their life. Giving shelter to the homeless, it saves their life. Visiting the sick, visiting those in prison, it saves their life. Someone loves them. And through these works of service, these acts of service to others, we can experience God with us. We can experience the presence of Christ. And so does that other person whom we're serving. Christ's entire life was a life of service for our life. We call to mind Christ's own words. "I have come not to be served, but to serve, to give my life as a ransom for the many." The Lord also talks about a parable where He talks about the master whose workers in the field finally come back from their day's work. And He talks about the master of the house, him putting on his apron and having his workers sit down at his table and wait on them. How about the Lord washing of the feet of his disciples in John's Gospel. And Peter protests, "You'll never wash my feet." Peter's thought, "How can you be such a humble servant?" That's Jesus. And then we look to Christ on the cross. The ultimate, the absolute act of life-giving service. God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, so that we who believe may never die. This is what service can do for one another. My dear people, we are in a time of unprecedented upheaval. We're all experiencing it, each in our own way. A time unmatched by anything else we've experienced in our own lives, where darkness and discouragement and doubt seem to be the forefront of all we experience. Yet, this language of love is also unmatched. Acts of service is life-giving. Acts of service is proof that God is with us. Let's take a look to see how this language of love, this act of service, is unmatched in these our days. We look to the first responders, police, fire, EMTs. We look to the healthcare workers, the healthcare professionals, those who work in the ERs and ICUs, the lab technicians, the medical researchers, caretakers, teachers, the workers and the volunteers in food pantries, the soup kitchens, neighbors helping neighbors, family helping family. So many going above and beyond the call of duty. And just as powerful are the small acts of service that we do for one another. Small acts that truly are life-giving. The phone call that you give to a person who may receive no other phone call for that day. And your phone call makes their day. Gives them life in a real sense. Or the greeting cards that we mail and the notes that we mail, or the quick visits that we make to people. These acts of service are truly life-giving. The prayers that we offer up on behalf of one another. That's God with us. That is life-giving. Now, true, we can't do everything for everyone. We can't do it all. And so I like this one saying, what I can't do for all, let me do it for one. Let me do it for that one person who needs me the most. Let that language of love, let that act of service be carried out through me. And one of the simplest yet most powerful acts that we as a parish, St. Francis de Sales, can do, how about next weekend when you come for Mass? Let's fill up our food pantry box. Now the food that was there was just taken to our local food pantry, so it's empty. Let's fill it up next weekend. Something so simple can be so life-giving to so many people. And that's proof God is with us. Let's take advantage of that act of service. All of these acts of service have the power to bring out the best in us. And so we call them on that no pandemic, no sickness, no darkness, no upheaval can stop this one undeniable truth, that God is